Well, hello, hello. Happy August 10th. Today was the trial day, and all they did today was continue the process of selecting the jurors. So apparently, jury selection can take several days. Okay, and that process could take about a week. So of course, I'm frustrated because I don't know how the process works. But I thought that hey, we was gonna have witness testimonies today. So but I've been kind of been checking all day, um, off and on looking for live coverage. And then the judge said, okay, we're going to all right, we're going to welcome the jurors in, but then there was nothing. Okay, so tomorrow the judge and attorneys will continue questioning prospective jurors about things such as whether they already know a lot about Tupac's murder, whether they've seen Keefe interviews or documentaries, or connections to law enforcement, or hardships that can prevent them from serving, and most importantly, whether they can remain impartial. Keefe attorneys specifically said those types of issues would be addressed during jury selection. Hold on a second. My phone is about to die. To plug that in real quick. All right. So I thought they were going to do opening statements today, but they probably will not. It probably will not even happen tomorrow either. So jury selection, unless jury selection moves faster than expected, I'm just wondering, okay, why didn't they start this jury selection process like weeks ago? Why they have to wait to the actual day that we're expecting the trial? It could be that I don't understand how the process goes. This is my first time covering a trial, so just bear with me. So once the final jury is finally selected and sworn in, the prosecution and defense will give their opening statements. And then the prosecution begins calling witnesses. Then the trial itself is expected to last roughly 5 to 6 weeks. Um, but AP reports prosecutors expect approximately 35 to 45 witnesses during the trial. So that's reduced from the 200. Okay, and so I will be, of course, covering tomorrow and every day and report what information I can find out. So, again, tomorrow jury selection will continue. And something else. Let me see. 1 second here. Let's see. I had some other notes earlier. Hold on. Okay, so I was asking about who may testify and how can their testimony help? like Tupac's sister. Like she was not even in Vegas. So what are they going to be having her testify about, right? If she wasn't even there. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, and as far as Suge Knight, one thing I found out is that, remember, it seems obvious that the only way they would get Suge Knight to testify is if they offered him a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. But Suge Knight himself couldn't simply make Clark County prosecutors give him a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Keefe D. And there are a few reasons why. Suge is already serving a 28-year California prison sentence after pleading no contest to voluntary manslaughter in 2018. No contest is where you're not admitting guilt and you're not saying that you're not guilty. It's like remaining neutral. So the Keefe D murder prosecution is in Nevada, Las Vegas, Nevada. So Nevada prosecutors generally can't just reduce Suge's California sentence themselves. And I didn't think about that. It's like, you know what? They may not be able to offer him a plea deal that's going to affect where he is currently serving his time, which is California. Is out of their jurisdiction. So what could happen is that Suge, through his attorney, could say something like, I'm willing to cooperate or testify if there is something in return. But prosecutors could discuss possible cooperation arrangements, but any benefit involving his California conviction or sentence would ordinarily require involvement from the appropriate California authorities and potentially the court. And there's another major issue. Suge has publicly indicated that he doesn't want to testify against Keefe D. So a prosecutor subpoena him. If he's refusing to cooperate, then can raise separate legal questions depending on what he's asked. Whether he invokes the Fifth Amendment and whether immunity is involved. So he can say, I plead the Fifth, meaning that I'm not going to make a statement, basically. So if Suge suddenly does testify, one of the first things Keefe D's defense would likely investigate is whether Suge received or was promised any consideration for his testimony. So they probably say, oh, he's just testifying because he was offered yada, yada, yada. Okay. Which they would have no proof of that, but any agreement or benefit could become important impeachment material for the defense. So if okay, but Suge is still on the prosecution's witness list and is the other surviving eyewitness to the shooting. But as of today, he publicly said he does not want to testify and wants to be left out of the case. So he is considered unlikely to testify despite his importance as a witness. So at this point, we may not be able to rely on Suge negotiating any type of deal that would motivate him to testify. So, a fascinating question to watch, though, is what happens if prosecutors subpoena Shug and he still refuses to testify. That could become a significant development during the trial. I thought that if you're subpoenaed, you have to testify. But again, I don't know. If you know, drop that down in the comments. If you're subpoenaed, does that mean you have to testify against your will? But it still seems like, okay, I'll testify, but I'm going to get up there and plead the fifth, meaning I have the right to remain silent. But who knows? But I'll continue watching to see if anything emerges about Shug being subpoenaed or compelled to testify. Okay. Now, Tupac's sister, Sekua, I'm sorry, I can never pronounce her name. Set for short. Set Shakur. She is reportedly on the prosecution's potential witness list, along with Tupac's stepbrother Mopreme Shakur and his cousin Katari Cox. But being on the witness list does not guarantee that even she will actually take the stand. Okay. But why would Tupac's sister testify? Even though she was not at the shooting and she couldn't testify as an eyewitness to who killed Tupac, her testimony would likely have a different purpose. Prosecutors could potentially use her to establish family background information about Tupac and authenticate or explain certain information or address matters about which she has direct personal knowledge. But exactly what prosecutors intend to ask her hasn't been publicly established as of yet. They will probably ask her questions about, like, what kind of person was he? You know, tell us a little bit about your brother. You know, and then that would be a good time for her to really express the impact of his death on her and her family. You know, like, what do they call that? They called it a family impact statement or something like that. And there's also an interesting angle that Set hasn't simply said that Keefe did it. But when Davis was indicted in 2023, she called the arrest a pivotal moment. But specifically, she said that she would reserve judgment until the facts and proceedings were complete, and adding that the family was seeking real justice. Okay, so if she takes the stand, I'll definitely be sharing that information, even though she can't personally identify the occupants of the Cadillac based on witnessing the shooting. She was not there. Okay. Then I thought I had something on Mopreme. Or is that where? Hold on a second. I'm just making sure that that was all my notes for today. There was something that they were saying that I saw where Keefe D waived his right for allowing the jury to sentence him. I was trying to understand what that meant. Hold on a second. Let me find that piece. Let's see, waive. Wait a minute, hold on. Jury sentence. Sentence. Here we go, right there. All right, and I hope this thing is still recording because I look up and it's doing something different every couple of moments I look up. So let's see. Hold on. I know I wrote that down. And where is that at? Otherwise, I'm gonna have to just explain it from memory. Um, okay, so I'll check one more time and then I'm just gonna say it off the top of my head. So the judge, there was a little bit of footage of Keefe D and his attorney speaking to the judge, and she was at, oh, I think I found it. She was asking him something about he had he could make a decision as to whether, losing my voice, as to whether he wanted to allow for the jury to sentence him, and he waived that right. And the the judge asked him multiple times if he was sure and that he understands what that means. So that would mean that the jury, sorry, let me drink some water. I found some more stuff. I found some more good notes here. Oh, yeah, here's some more stuff here. Let me sip on some water. Ooh. Okay, I will get back to that. Now I can find my notes. Because I had put in my notes like what was it, what was the most damaging statements that Keefe D made that hurt his case. And I thought that was interesting. Okay. Like, what statements did Keefe D make on YouTube interviews, the proper interview, and the book that hurt his case? And several of Keefe D's own statements are potentially damaging because prosecutors can argue that different statements made years apart reinforce the same core story, that he was in the white Cadillac participating in the retaliation after the MGM Grand Fight, was involved with gun. That is especially important because Nevada prosecutors do not have to prove that Keefe personally fired the fatal shots to pursue their murder theory. He participated. Okay. And then the proper interview. Now, this may be the most important set of statements. During his cooperation with the investigators, Davis reportedly described being inside the white Cadillac, and this is way before the book was written. And he was inside the white Cadillac, involved in the shooting, and discussed how the gun was passed to the occupants. And he was the shot caller. Like he had the authority to be able to say, okay, we're going to kill this person. And prosecutors contend that he described his own role in the events leading to the shooting. And the defense fought to keep this material out, but the judge has allowed it to be used at trial. The controversy is that Davis made those statements under a proper agreement, which provided protections connected to his cooperation. But this was in LA, y'all. This was in Los Angeles, where this proper agreement was made with Greg Kading and other law enforcement. So his attorneys argued that the government effectively promised he wouldn't be prosecuted based on what he disclosed. Prosecutors maintained that the agreement doesn't immunize the later public statements he voluntarily made. He was just king for a day. Okay? So he shouldn't have said anything after that. Then his book, Compton Street Legend. This could be particularly damaging because he later put essentially the same story into a commercially published memoir. And it's in writing, okay? And in the book, Davis places himself in Las Vegas and in the Cadillac connected to the shooting and describes the events surrounding the retaliation after Orlando Anderson was beaten at the MGM Grand. And that gives prosecutors an argument along the lines of this wasn't something he said only once during a protected police interview. Years later, he voluntarily told the story again. The Associated Press reports that his memoir helped revive the investigation and implicated his nephew, Orlando Anderson, and the other men allegedly involved. But he's the only one that's still living. They're all deceased. Then Vlad TV YouTube interviewer. These could be even more troublesome because they're recorded video statements. Jurors can potentially hear and see for themselves. And he was so cocky in that interview. And then in 2019, Davis, he discussed pulling alongside Tupac and Suge Knight's BMW, and he described shooting beginning from his group's vehicle and said he ducked when the gunfire started. And he also said that he passed the gun to the back. And the guy in the back passenger seat, he said he didn't want to do the shooting. So he handed the gun to Orlando, and Orlando kind of crawled over the guy and started shooting. Like he gave all those details, even about the girls that were there, about where they ditched the car, where they put the gun, and he's joking about them all getting out the car and they're going to cross the street, and then there's the ambulance with them pumping on Tupac's chest, and he thought that was funny. Dude, do you really think that you can laugh and joke about someone being shot nearly to death and think that you're just going to walk away free and say, I lied. In the full interview, he also discussed seeing Suge Knight in Las Vegas on the night Tupac was shot. In Orlando Anderson connection to what happened and other details surrounding the shooting. And he returned to Vlad again discussing Orlando's MGM beating and Tupac's shooting and the surrounding events. And the statement that hurt him the most, Reuter summarizes perhaps the biggest problem for the defense. Davis previously admitted being in the Cadillac and handing over the weapon, while prosecutors alleged that he organized the retaliation, and he even said who gave him the gun. And that all matters because his defense now disputes those earlier accounts. So prosecutors potentially have a powerful sequence to present to jurors. And then in 2008, he tells investigators another detailed story. Then in 2019, he publishes a book describing his involvement. Then he goes on camera and discusses being in the Cadillac. Then in 2023, he gives additional interviews discussing the case. Okay? And now that he's charged, his defense says those accounts were exaggerated, fabricated, or made for entertainment and money. That doesn't automatically prove the prosecution's case. His lawyers can attack the reliability, circumstances, and inconsistencies of every statement, but the repetition across different settings is what could make these statements particularly difficult for the defense to explain away. His story is consistent. Okay. So, what do you say? What do you think about that? Then there's evidence. Another thing, Keefe denied even being in Las Vegas. And there are several people that said that they saw him there. So there is evidence that prosecutors can use to argue that Keefe was in Las Vegas on September 7th, 1996. But an important point for the trial is that much of the publicly known evidence comes from his own repeated accounts, rather than something simple like a hotel receipt with his name on it. But the strongest publicly known pieces are, first of all, his own admission. So Keefe repeatedly said he was in Vegas and inside the Cadillac from which the shots were fired. And he admitted to handing over the gun. Then in his memoir, Compton Street Legend, that also places him in the Cadillac and in Vegas. Then, of course, all his interviews that he said that he was in Vegas. Okay. He placed himself there and in the car. He told on himself. Okay. And then, of course, the proffer. He said that he was there. But here's the question. If Keefe D's defense now tells the jury, I wasn't even in Las Vegas that night, The prosecution needs to convince jurors that his earlier version was true and his current version is false. And that's why the corroborating evidence becomes extremely important. His lawyers can say he lied in interviews and exaggerated his book to make money. And prosecutors can answer, why would a man repeatedly put himself inside the murder vehicle and describe details of the crime, publish that account, and then say on camera that he had no reason to lie? Okay. I don't know why somebody would do that. Unless they're just arrogant and cocky. But one thing that can hurt them, if they have any footage of him in Vegas, there were witnesses, okay, around. If anybody established in the public reporting that they saw Keefe D, if there's any casino surveillance clearly showing Keefe D, a hotel registration in his name, credit card receipts, or another surviving eyewitness saying, I personally saw Keefe D in Las Vegas, that could be extremely important when testimony starts. If they can prove that he was there, then you got to believe that everything else he's saying is a lie. Okay. So, and there are some eyewitnesses that have come forward and said, yeah, he was there. All right. One of them was Mob James. One of them was Zip. Zip is P. Diddy's friend, or yeah, I don't know if they're friends, but according to Keefe D, P. Diddy gave the $1 million check to Zip to give to him. And Zip was the one that provided the guns. And then Foxy Brown. Keefe D claims that Foxy Brown was in the car with Zip. So if she could identify him as being there and that she saw him and talked to him, that would be bad. Gene Deal also. And Mob James. And Suge, of course, saw him in Vegas. So those are the kinds of witnesses prosecutors would want. If Keefe D's defense is now claiming he wasn't in Las Vegas, he's in trouble. So So this is what Mob James, he said he has publicly discussed Keefe D and the events surrounding Tupac's murder. And that he personally saw Keefe D in Vegas. And Gene Deal also. And Zip also. So if they can get those individuals to testify, that might be all they need. Now, there's also prosecutors have previously disclosed evidence that a room at the Monte Carlo Resort in Las Vegas, which is now Park MGM, was booked under the name of Keefe D's wife, Paula Clemens, on September the 7th, 1996, the same date that Tupac was shot. Reporting also says a room at the Excalibur was reserved under the name of Keefe D's nephew, Orlando. So that could be significant because Keefe D's defense is now disputing that he was in Las Vegas. A hotel reservation in his wife's name doesn't by itself prove Keefe D personally stayed in the room, but prosecutors can use it as corroborating circumstantial evidence, especially when combined with his own earlier accounts placing himself in Las Vegas and in the Cadillac. So the prosecution's argument could become much stronger if they combine hotel records, independent witnesses, and then Keefe D's own statements. So just because the hotel was in his wife's name, that don't mean that he wasn't there. I've traveled with my husband. Most time we travel together. And normally I book the hotels. And then another person I'm thinking of is Mike Tyson. He could theoretically become a witness because he was in Las Vegas that night and his fight was the reason Tupac, Suge Knight, Orlando, and many of the people surrounding the case were even at the MGM Grand. If there's any footage of him there, but there's nothing verifying that Mike Tyson is presently on either side's disclosed witness list or that he has been subpoenaed. So, but where Tyson could potentially matter is the timeline that Tupac and Suge attended Tyson's fight at the MGM Grand shortly before Tupac and others attacked Orlando. Prosecutors alleged that confrontation triggered the retaliation that culminated in Tupac's shooting later that night. So, and then the question is, would Tyson actually have anything useful to establish about Keefe D himself? I mean, the timeline. And if he personally saw Keefe D in Vegas that night. So, now let me get down to this part where it's talking about what happened in court today. Let's see. Now, so Judge Carly Kearney said, like I said, the prospective jurors will be brought back Thursday for challenges, including the parties' peremptory challenges. The court also plans to seat 4 alternate jurors because the trial could last 4 to 5 weeks. And the judge also formally confirmed on the record with Dwayne Davis that he has waived jury sentencing. So the jury will still determine guilt or innocence. But if Davis is convicted, then Judge Kearney, not the jury, will determine his sentence. But and then there's also a potential scheduling issue for next week. Defense attorney Michael Sampt, because he told the court he may need August 19th available to depose Clark County District Attorney Steve Wolfson in an unrelated matter. And he didn't know how long that was going to take and if it was going to run into the Keefe D court date. So I guess they're playing that one by ear. And he asked the judge for some. The judge said that she would allow for some scheduling flexibility, but it's still not confirmed about August 19th, whether it's going to be canceled or cause a trial delay. Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about that. About what does that mean? Because I'd never heard of that, where you can decide whether the jury is going to sentence you or determine the verdict, or whether the judge was. I didn't even know that you had a choice. Well, where's that part at? Okay, so that's all I have right now. And whether or not that was a good idea for him to waive his right, it just depends. So, and I thought I had more information on that. But anyway, that is all I have for today. So tune in tomorrow, and as the information comes in, I will share with you. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Peace. Come on. Why is it my thank you screen going up here?